Lots of knowledge sharing, resource sharing, questions and answers being generated in there. And during the day, I'm head of community of FinTech Collective's DeFi fund, also on their investment team there.
Hi everyone, my name is Thanasi. I'm a co-founder of an organization called Civics Unplugged. We have a fellowship program that runs 1,000 kids from 74 different countries through a civic innovation program. So that was the main thing, and then in November we launched the Dream DAO, which is built to onboard a diverse group of Gen Zers into Web3. So we launched on November, we raised $200,000 and launched the first Explorers program, which is placing them all in internships across Web3 X social impact companies. I'm also a National Geographic explorer and recently launched a venture fund called AeroForce off of a traditional climate venture fund, a $31 million close. It's a $5 million venture fund focused on regenerative crypto economics, but with a focus on DAO governance driving the venture model.
Oh, tough act to follow there. Hi everyone, I'm Alexa Lombardo. I am one of the co-founders of Her House, which is a Web3 ecosystem of women builders. We partner actively with different women's-led initiatives in the Web3/crypto space across 4 verticals, which are wealth, health, arts and culture, and education and impact. So we are really dedicated to answering the question of, I'm a woman in Web3 or women non-binary folk in Web3, now what? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? What are the resources and tools at my disposal? And we are all about cross-pollination and collaboration for the greater good. In my day job, I run a venture studio / branding studio called Atomic Number 8. At the core of what we do is sustainability and impact. So, really building future-proofed brands and initiatives. And we started off firmly footed in Web 2, but have now migrated more into the Web 3 space and are actively working with everything from NFT projects to DAOs to brands who are just looking to get their feet wet in the space to really sort of build a bridge between Web 2 and Web 3.
Yes, one thing I'd love for each of you to kind of get into a little bit more is what made you focus on these respective communities. What inspired you? What challenges did you see with existing systems that you were like, this is what I want to focus on, this is where I want to make a difference?
Yeah, for us it started off, we chose housing because at the time I was really pissed off that I had a 12-month lease and I wanted to travel and stuff. So we were thinking of ways by which we could decompose it so that people have more freedom. My co-founder at the time was also purchasing a property, and he was able to see how shitty that process is. And so we kind of both organically saw this really antiquated, analog-based infrastructure piece that's really fundamental to our society. Housing is one of the first building blocks of Maslow's pyramid, right? And so we thought Web3 was a very unique opportunity by which we could really reshape the fundamental economic interactions that shape housing. We start with the lease. We kind of use Web3 to decompose what the economic interactions are what they are, and we make them much more composable, and we can create very interesting new market dynamics around it. And so we think if we do our job really well here, that we can really increase the amount of people that can access housing and can find a lifestyle housing lifestyle that kind of fits their needs. And so that's what we're really excited about.
Yeah, great question. I think it's pretty obvious to anyone who's in the crypto space that it's pretty homogeneous. I was actually pretty deep into my crypto journey when I met Dina and Natasha, the founders of Boys Club. And after having lots of ongoing conversations with them and coming to the first gathering that they held, I was like, wow, this is so cool. At the time, I probably knew 1 or 2 women in crypto, and it was just so amazing and energizing being in this room of women who were everything from biologists to computer scientists to interior designers and marketers, And I remember opening up my Rainbow wallet and like showing them my NFTs, and they're like, "Whoa!" And I was like, "Yeah, it's so cool." So that was really that was really validating for me to be able to share that experience with other women, but also to find that community myself. So after we had that first event, I went to Dina and Natasha, and I was like, "Guys, the demand is here and the vibes are here. So I think we should really like try to build this into something bigger." And that's when I came on as a member of the core team. And that week we assembled about 7 women in our core team. And it's been fun from there.
Yeah, the crypto space looks a lot like me. It's really bad. Civics Unplugged was kind of started for the same reason. We were really like concerned that the word democracy and like government, and when you thought about politicians, it was like you didn't think about innovation, right? And the way that these politicians come to power, the system, even college, really forces you to think in one way, and by the time you get there, you're thinking in a really horrible way, and you're kind of screwing the rest of us over. And so what Civics Unplugged was built to do was give people the personal development training, the leadership access, the funding, and the network to take a different path, right? So we incentivize civic innovation. All of our programming is about civic innovation, new ways of governance, new ways of making change in your community, outside of Web3. That was pre we were even talking about crypto. And then in November, we realized we have now 2,000 kids from 70 different countries that are all so passionate about civic innovation, right? The community is majority young women, it's majority non-white, and they're all fucking, can I curse on here? Sorry. I'm sorry. They're all so passionate about like making change, and we were like, okay, so the one way to actually do that is teaching them Web3, right? The tools, Web3 in itself isn't like going to change the world, but the tools can be utilized in a ton of different places to do so. And if we're training a bunch of kids from the ages of 16 to understand the tools and understand the communities, they can grow up like when they're 24 and build something really cool utilizing the tools. So the Dream DAO was built to onboard our already super diverse and super passionate community into a space that was really revenue focused, really monetarily driven, and like I said, insanely looked like Thanasi and no one else. And so now like when we host events or when we have learning togethers, it's so cool to see like a really diverse group of young people that are passionate about like regen technology and social good DAOs. Like Madison, Ale's here, Ale's writing the book on impact DAOs, literally, and like with Kevin.
With the founder of Bitcoin.
Yeah, and like, yeah, Kevin Walkie. But like building that bridge is kind of all what we're about, because you know people like Gary and I have that network to give, and why not like open that pathway to everybody?
Yeah, so for me, crypto Web3 sort of changed a lot about my perspective of how I viewed the world, and also how I looked at technology. I think that why we set out to build Her House was because yes, onboarding is so important, and like thank goodness for groups like Boys Club who are dedicated to bringing more women into the space. However, it can still be sort of intimidating once you're in there, because it is still such a male-dominated environment. And so how do you ask for help? How do you, find the right resources? How do you get the right education for the area that you want to actually like focus on your journey to self-actualization, which is what we look at. You said, Web3 is going to change the world, but for a lot of women, it is going to change the world. And it does foster greater opportunity for that self-actualization, that achievement of goals. And also it opens, new doors for women to get into the technology space. And one of the things that excites me, because imagine if a woman had invented Google and how differently it would look. I mean, sorry guys, but there are just certain things that I think, the female perspective is really important. I don't want to genderize this, but I think that we need to empower women with the tools that they are looking for to actually achieve the dreams that they have and the things that they want to build. And so I do believe that Web3 has the power to do that, and that's what we're all about.
I was talking to Nick White from Celestia this weekend. He said something that really resonated with me, and it was like the layer zero of crypto is the people, right? So we have this incredible opportunity to be intentional about the types of people that we empower in Web3. So I think what you guys are all doing and the things that are inspiring you to do this is amazing. So how do you personally define social impact and social good, and how is what you're working on paving the way for us to kind of achieve this social impact?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question because it almost implies that there's like something called like social impact that we can measure. I think I tend to take a much more individualistic look at what social impact looks like. I think in some ways we can understand like a society that maximizes social impact as one that maximizes the individual members that compose the society. So when kind of viewing it from that question, like we think about what is like the most important question that we can tackle, the most important problem that we can tackle that other people aren't, and that's kind of how we approached building Hold On. And the reason why we thought it was like an important question to tackle is just because people get trapped in these like rent cycles for decades with nothing to show for it, which directly affects the economic security that they feel for themselves and their family. And housing just in general over the last few decades has become like, it serves the people like less and less and less. And fewer people can actually afford a home for themselves. And we think that points like a fundamental problem in the market. And what Web3 and crypto in general, it's all about creating new markets and new ways by which that we can secure them. It started off with Bitcoin and ways by which we can secure layer ones. It evolved into governance tokens and how we can use that to secure protocols. I think the future is ways by which we can take even more interesting representations of ownership and value. Yes?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
just share mics.
Can I just go voice? Yeah? I'll just go voice.
For the live stream, they won't be able to hear as well.
Got it. Yeah, and so I think the future is different ways by which you can represent value on chain that is able to like interact with like the physical world, and we think crypto is going to evolve past these on-chain DeFi games or like artistic representations and really influence the way by which people interact and atoms move and stuff like that. And so that's the future we're really betting on.
I think in any definition of social good or public good, there are two really important things to recognize. One is that any definition of a social good or public good comes with a shared understanding of what good means, right? And what public benefit is. The second assumption that comes in any definition of social good is who the groups included in that model of social are, right? Like historically, we've seen certain groups excluded from public goods or social goods. So I think, those are just, I guess, two pieces of framework that I think are really important to recognize in that question. As it relates to Boys Club, I'd say Boys Club is a social good for any woman or non-binary person who is looking for resources, a community, a network within crypto, an entryway, an entry point. And I'd also say that Boys Club is a social good or public good for anyone, regardless of gender identification, who believes that the inclusion and onboarding of women and non-binary people into crypto results in a net positive.
I think that if like 100,000 to 200,000 people are not using blockchain technology to integrate into governments and philanthropies and nonprofit models in 10 years or 20 years, the Dream DAO has absolutely failed. I think that like when we think about social impact, especially in crypto, it's really easy to like forget about all of the systemic like deep problems. You mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like people can't think about crypto social good until they can put food on the table, and people can't think about putting food on the table until they have a table. And so how do we really like create the people that are thinking about using Web3, not for like, I've seen a ton of NFT projects. They're like, oh, well, 30% is donating to this like nonprofit organization. So 30% is putting it into a philanthropic model that has historically failed the people it's trying to serve. That's not impact. It is, but it's not the truest form, right? The same truest form is not like just saying that you are providing content for a bunch of people and then not helping them follow through. What I really admire about the work that you all are doing is that it's not just the access, but it's the follow through. Same thing about DreamDAO. It's like, how do you get a bunch of people the tools and the network and the funding and the money to say, okay, I'm not going to spend my time working at Morgan Stanley or this company. I'm going to spend my time thinking about how I can build a public good. No hate to like Morgan Stanley or finance people if they're in the room, but like with a lot of these kids, a lot of them have to work at Starbucks or McDonald's to put money in their pocket, and they can't think about doing cool shit with crypto. They can't think about building public goods. And so when I define social impact, it's giving a lot of really smart people the ability to think about how to fix that hierarchy of needs. Like, how do we give all these kids the ability to say, I'm gonna go back into my community, maybe I'll use Web3, maybe not, but I'm gonna go back into my community, think about community tools, and help people fix the systemic issues that underlie in that like hyper-local area, right? That's the only way we're gonna start fixing some of the systemic problems, and we can use crypto funding for it, but really the ideals of crypto, especially coordination and community, can be taken without the social tokens and can be put into real solutions that these kids are building and really change the world.
Yeah, I would. I really agree with everything you just said there. I think really unlocking the opportunities that come with just understanding the ethos of crypto and Web3 and the principles of that. When we think about impact, a lot of what we're thinking about is like, how do we measure that? A lot of it is just peer to peer, and a lot of it is just, again, that in itself is sort of rooted in this kind of like crypto ethos where it's like, the individual and taking the time to really share something with another human or another person and actually teach them something and then almost like teach them how to fish, like that type of thing. And so I think that's sort of what we are focused on, is like building this ecosystem, this network where you are empowered with the tools and then you're able to take those tools, take those learnings and empower someone else. And I think that again is not something that's dependent necessarily on having access to crypto funds, having access to an NFT. Right now, we are definitely on our pathway to wanting to form a DAO, but we are not a DAO. We are not token gated. We are focused on these partnerships and sort of figuring out with the community what does impact look like, and therefore how do we tie even crypto into it right now. It's kind of not, right? Like we're doing a lot of like IRL meetings. We are thinking about how can I help one other person, but all of that stems from these values that are imbued in crypto and in Web3. And so if we can, sort of take that, teach more people about that, then maybe we can see sort of this network effect. And another note on metrics is that part of our MVP is actually this dashboard for women and non-binary builders in Web3 so that they can see the impact that they're having on each other. And we've talked with several organizations like Coordinate, for example, where they have these sort of these gifting pools where when you see someone gifting, rewarding another person in the community, the effect that has on the rest of the community and the incentive that has and the motivation that has. And so how do we visualize that? How do we create metrics for that? How do we measure that? That's all things that we're thinking about. But a lot of it isn't necessarily dependent on crypto or on Web3. It's just really dependent on those values.
Yeah, like I just want to reiterate that like super quickly. Most of the people that need to be like impacted, like social impact, are probably not in crypto. They're probably not working for or contributing to a DAO or working for a fintech company. They're probably like totally not knowledgeable about what's going on here. And so like exactly what you said, bringing that ethos to them, even without the tools, is the most important thing.
Love that. I think a lot of you brought up frameworks and tools, so that's going to be the topic of my next question is what are some frameworks and tools that Web3 enables and offers that unlocks the ability to create greater impact than what was possible before crypto even existed?
Yeah, well, we think Web3 is like a game of economics and economic incentives and economic relationships. And so however we use Web3, it needs to be with that understanding that it's a technology that can use to coordinate and to create new ways by which to coordinate and get things done. So the way we approached it, our initial product is focused on how can we use Web3 to replicate lease agreements. And so in our initial kind of MVP platform, like anybody can create like home rentals that instead of powered by like written contracts that you have to sign and fax and everything, it's powered by NFTs and the commitments that each NFT represents for both the homeowner and like the guest. And you know, once you can like define some of these economic agreements and enforce them with code, you can do all sorts of like really interesting things. Like now we can create the first kind of secondary market for home rentals. We can create new financing tools by which like home developers can sell their leases in the future for capital today and really like de-risk the whole supply chain of creating a new home. And both of those things, like increasing the utilization of existing homes and helping more homes be created, are really like core to our end hope of being able to improve housing accessibility. So yeah, we really take like a very like economics and market-driven approach to how we see the impact of Web3 on the world.
Yeah, really like what you said there. I highly recommend reading Richard Kim's A Stream of Social Token Consciousness. It's amazing, and it really influenced how I think about microeconomy building, basically, within DAOs. Yeah. Yeah, great question, huge question. I mean, when I think about like technological innovation and some of the most bleeding edge, cutting edge tech that I think is really influencing the way that we live our lives and shape our world, like AI, computing, the internet, biotechnology, crypto and blockchain is right up there with that. I mean, it's enabling new methods, as we all know, for coordination, communication, funding, sharing, knowledge building, data, supply chains, manufacturing, the list goes on, and that's so exciting. I think one thing that I'm most interested in, perhaps obviously, is DAOs. And I was trying to describe to my friend the other day what it's been like to think about building a DAO. And just for some context, I'm leading the initiative, pioneering the initiative to transform the Boys Club community into a DAO. And what that's been like has been like trying to create, a governance structure, a mini government, a microeconomy, thinking about values within a community, culture within a community. And it's all these intersecting points that are enabled by different tools. And what I think is super exciting is in a lot of the research I've been doing to try to understand what steps to take and how to best approach the building of this infrastructure that will support this DAO. I've been talking to so many DAO tooling startups, and I'm learning about new things that these tools can do, whether that's a sort of transformative NFT that stores on-chain data and is triggered through a smart contract based on the rules and contributions of a member in the DAO, or whether that's a new kind of gating mechanism for a community. There's so many different tools being created, and that's really exciting.
I think the individual approach that you brought up was really interesting. There's two kind of main things. One is incentive alignment, and the other one is ownership. On the incentive alignment thing, crypto and DeFi allows us to create liquidity for traditionally illiquid things. And so when you think about carbon markets, you can literally make it financially incentivized for regular people, not large corporations, to want to protect the planet. You can allow them to buy futures of trees. You can allow them to be rewarded for protecting the oceans. And that's never been available before, right? It's a once in a generation opportunity to build technology that aligns market incentives with planetary incentives. Outside, like right now, the only thing telling people to buy carbon offsets is the government. The government is telling them to buy carbon offsets, and they're charging like hundreds of thousands of dollars at like an 80% upcharge for these offsets to these large corporations. That's not sustainable. That's not how the market works. That's not how the government works. It's just there because we want a virtue signal that we're helping the planet, but we're really not. This technology enables us to actually help the planet individually and also in large corporations. So that incentive alignment is super important. And the next thing is ownership. I really believe that like communities need to have each member feel really, really like fulfilled, and they need to incentivize flourishing. And the only way to do that is to, build spaces, build communities, both in person and digital, that make people really happy. And so how do we do that? Well, you give them ownership over the space, especially in a lot of like emerging communities, even like not in Discords or group chats, like participatory budgeting, for example. If you went into a community and you're like, okay, we are going to have a $10 million package for your neighborhood to reinvigorate your neighborhood. And we're going to allow you, as citizens of the neighborhood, to have a vote on where that budget goes. You have someone vote for a fountain, and that fountain actually gets built. That's their fountain. It's not just a fountain. That's the fountain that I advocated for. That's the fountain that I want to be built in my community. And that makes everybody in the community feel ownership. It makes them feel happy. When you build these spaces that have been co-created and are co-stewarded by members of the community, you help them all feel better, and who knows what creativity that unlocks, right? And so when you talk about a lot of housing in America, or even like we're working on a project with ex-convicts that is allowing them to get out of prison, learn about the financial barriers that crypto unlocks for them, and pretty much take their suffering and like turn it into something really, really powerful. We're building a marketplace for them. We're helping like victims post pictures of their loved ones and put them on chain. Like all of that stuff is not financial. Like it's not for them to make a lot of money, but it makes them feel fulfilled. Like we have a network of 200,000 survivors of sexual assault, and when they put their stories on chain, when they share their stories, when they advocate for their loved ones, they're not doing it for money, but they're doing it because they don't want those stories to disappear. Like that's the value of blockchain, but also the value of the communities that we create. So when you combine those two, the incentive structures and the opportunity to kind of like co-own and co-steward really amazing things, you can help people feel more individually fulfilled, communities feel more fulfilled, and then hopefully that solves a lot of the problems. If not, I really don't know what the answer is, because it's kind of the last kind of thing we can try.
Before I want to pick apart one thing that you said. I think ownership is really important, and there's so much more than being financially compensated, right? So I guess one question I have for all of you is, how do you think about creating that recognition, creating that ownership within your communities, where people feel like I am getting compensated for the work that I'm doing, I am getting rewarded for the work that I'm doing? Whoever wants to start.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we are actively exploring those opportunities. I think one of the things that's most exciting for me is peer-to-peer learning, learn to earn, and also teach to earn, right? Where you're incentivized not only to learn something, but also to teach something to another person. And I think we hear a lot about learn to earn, but we don't talk enough about teach to earn. So it's totally, again, and that's also like, there's this ownership, there's this incentive, right? Where you are incentivized to actually do something that is a public good, but then also you are getting that sort of like sense of like ownership in a stake in a community. So it's sort of this cycle. And so I think that's definitely something that that keeps communities engaged, but also keeps them feeling that sense of fulfillment, but also keeps them incentivized monetarily, which is still really, really important to a lot of the people in these communities, right? Like, I'm not going to say like, yeah, we're all doing this for the greater good. Like, there's money in this, and like we all need money, so there's that too. But again, like that fulfillment is also like an equal importance in a lot of cases. So that's sort of one area that I think is really exciting for me.
Do you want to snake it back, or do you want?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Go for it. Yeah, 100%.
That's a great question. One thing that I've been thinking about a lot, right, is we talk a lot about ownership in communities and how powerful that is. But I think something that's too often neglected is the baseline needed to enable ownership, right? And what is that? That's a network of participants that are intrinsically motivated. Without that, you can't have ownership, or ownership at least won't be sustainable. And the outcome of that ownership and of that creation and drive in the community won't be sustainable. So I think there's truly a path to ownership, and that's something I've been thinking a lot. To answer your question more directly, right now we're starting off with a very traditional DAO structure of contribution, allowing members and participants to have a greater say in the direction of the community. So what does that look like in practice is voting power. We're also exploring opportunities to financially compensate our members, which is super important to us, and planning to do that through retroactive compensation.
I think humans love to virtue signal, like at every single level of society, everybody loves virtue signaling. And yeah, like everybody's a huge, like even I am, like when you put a profile picture as your NFT, you're like virtue signaling that you're part of a community, right? But like when you really lean into that, you can provide people ways to like virtuously signal. Like even at the level of like in the Dream DAO, we were just talking about it, like a lot of people will like be really loud and say that they're doing a lot of stuff and then contribute zero. And there'll be a lot of people that keep their heads down and don't contribute to the conversation but actually do stuff. And so what we're trying to build is a way that incentivizes someone to sit right at the middle of like they're talking, they're contributing to the conversation, but they're actually executing. And a lot of that just comes down to like actual tracking of qualitative and quantitative metrics, like how much you produce, do you hit deadlines, like yes, it's all vibes, but like if you want a DAO to succeed long term, you can't just rely on the vibes. You actually have to do things, which is unfortunate, but that's kind of like the way it works. A lot of DAOs are kind of just sitting there in their group chats, and that's great. But like, what are you doing on a day to day? And so what we're working on, literally, we drew this on the back of the book in the office. Is like, how do you tell people, okay, we're going to track like your contributions and your metrics. This is the game you're playing. Like the CU Fellowship, it's 500 kids. It's all gamified, right? So we track when you talk, what like optional events you show up to, what you contribute, and that might sound dystopian and scary, but when you tell everybody the game that they're playing and saying like these are the rewards if you hit this level, that's how you incentivize like ownership at a real level, because these kids are saying, okay, like I know what I want to do. I want to come to the CU Summit in New York City, so I have to hit these goals. I have to contribute this much, and you know, as they contribute, they get skywalkers, they get voting power, but they also just feel like they're building something really, really cool instead of like working at an internship or like working at a part-time job, which is cool in itself, but like they feel like they're contributing to a long-term thing that they can be doing part-time when they're 25 or 26. And that's as big, like the monetary part is super important too, because a lot of these kids don't have any stream of income, but like on top of that, think about like yourselves, how fulfilled you feel when you're doing something you love at work and you're getting paid for it. Like that's really like the Venn diagram intersection that we all should be hoping for. And so trying to build incentive structures and games that allow people to do that for themselves.
Yeah, and I just want to say one quick thing about that. We've all been contributing to the internet for, I don't know, a while now, 10 years, 20 years, right? And we're not getting rewarded for that, and we're still being tracked, right? So I think, again, like that's the shift here, is that like now you have a stake, you have ownership, you're getting rewarded for what you're doing, but like we're all playing this game already.
Yeah, you know, frankly, at Hold On, this isn't much of a problem because we're a team of 6 friends that are like really focused on building technology right now, so we're not investing that much in community. But I'd like to say like a story of caution from our time at InixCube. Like when we were creating the InixCube, we thought we were going to be the most community-first DAO, and in a lot of ways we were. Like we created all these like new models around like working groups and treasury reward programs that ended up permeating through the entire DAO space. But one of our principles of being inclusive and rewarding everyone that did something for us ended up creating this giant bureaucratic machine that gave our like leaders and decision makers like so many processes to do that totally took away the focus from building innovative products and creating like better technology. And as a result, we stopped shipping. And as a result, like our token price went from like $60 to like $4. And so I think it's very important to understand that like, you know, like all these new governance structures are great, but like if you're a technology company, if you're a startup, like you have to focus on product and technology, and sometimes that'll come in conflict with some of these ethos of what DAOs are supposed to be. Like DAOs are supposed to be these open communities, but if it's not fulfilling your goals, and the reason why you exist, then it's an important thing to just cut it off. So it's like when you explore this question and when you're building DAOs, it's just critical to be really honest and realistic about what it is that you want to do.
Yeah, but like shipping product is a lot different from the impact side, and I appreciate what you said because I think DAOs are really like probably not the best models for shipping product, right? It probably is like a more centralized structure. But when you come to like the social impact model, what you really need is people to align like their personal values and their core mission together and figure out how to work together. I think that's what DAOs are perfect at doing, is like aligning that North Star and then figuring out how everyone points whatever they're really good at doing that. We call them civic superpowers at Civics Unplugged, but everybody has a different name. And like that's what I'm really excited about on the social impact side. Like a lot of traditional philanthropies are really scared of crypto, but they love the idea of DAOs. And so it's like that might be a great on-ramp for a ton of traditional like wealth to come in and say, well, this is a great new way to impact the world. We can put a lot of money into this, but people just need to build the structures. Like we have the power to onboard a ton of wealth and influence onto the space, especially in social impact. And like the ideas here are the ones that are going to do it.
So there's so much I want to talk to you guys about, but we have limited time. Since we have limited time, one question is, what are some examples of success that you've seen in your communities, or even outside of your communities, that energizes you and keeps you going and fuels your belief that we are making an impact, that we are making a difference, and we are using these tools and frameworks in a way that I guess is positive sum?
Ukraine DAO is the first
Hell
one
yeah.
that comes to mind. I am a quarter Ukrainian, and I got involved with Ukraine DAO in the beginning. These guys, set out with a goal to raise money with for the war effort. They got money in the hands of people faster. They were able to actually have a real impact that is tangible, that is measurable in terms of being able to get funds to the people who needed it to buy goods, whether that be clothing, food, etc. And that would not have been possible. I mean, again, like you said, we are donating to these organizations that we've proven time and time again are broken, and a lot of that money, won't be seen for a while now, and we actually need to impact this situation now. And so I think they're a perfect example of how crypto can be used for a public good to really make a meaningful impact in a short amount of time with major significance.
Yeah, that was such a like goosebump inducing moment, because it really showcased the power of this technology to coordinate so many people all over the world to come together and raise such a large sum of money and get it to the people that needed it in that moment. And of course, there's limitations around like on and off ramps and like actually putting that to work. But yeah, that was like incredible.
Yeah, and I think it also displays that importance of like that network effect, that ecosystem, that peer-to-peer, right? They weren't just giving it to an organization on the ground in the Ukraine, they were giving it to individuals who were vetted, who there was like this trust, this serious like trust, person-to-person trust element to it, so that it could actually have that impact and that there was that kind of accountability there.
Yeah, because there's this like transparency that crypto enables that you don't have in traditional systems, which is huge. Yeah.
We have a joke that like if nonprofits don't want to take crypto and track their budgets, that they're probably hiding something and you should like audit them like now. But like one of my favorite stories was actually from yesterday. We were Chaba and I were speaking at another crypto event, and it was a bunch of people who were really skeptical of crypto, but they wanted to learn about crypto and social change. And someone was there. He was an ex-convict. He's now like a poet, and he's writing a screenplay. And he was like, wait, so if I have crypto and I get locked up for something that I didn't do and I come out 7 years later, can I still have my funds, or can the government take it away? I was like, no, like the whole point of crypto is that it's your ownership, like unless you XYZ. But the point was that he through coming to that session, like opened his eyes to a new world of ways that he could use the technology to benefit him and people like him. And it kind of made me realize that I've been like so heads down in the social impact Web3 space that I kind of like lost sight of the hundreds of millions of people that we haven't even talked to yet, that we haven't even brought into the circle yet. And that made me really excited, because it's like, imagine the ideas we haven't come across. Imagine the people that we haven't impacted. Like, we're still at 1% of our 100% goal. And that just made me really excited about the future.
Yeah, I guess within Boys Club there have been like a few moments or instances that have really stood out to me and made me feel super excited and happy and like fulfilled. One of which has been recently several women have like come to me and been like, I joined Boys Club 1 month, 2 months ago, and now I'm getting a job in Web3. And I'm like, fuck yes, like that is amazing and makes me feel so excited. Not only that they had the courage to take the initiative to learn something new and join a community of people that are focused on learning about something that they are totally like new to, but B, that it resonated so much, and hopefully the community was so supportive enough to allow them to leverage that into making the next step in their professional journey as well. Another thing that stood out to me was I attended uni in Los Angeles, and so a lot of my friends live there, and I started sending them some Boys Club Instagram posts. Highly recommend our Instagram, by the way. So I was like sending all these posts to my fiat friends of like the Kardashian clan in blockchain terms. And then they started texting me and being like, this is the first time that I'm understanding like what Web3 is. And I was like, yes, this is awesome. So it feels so good to really see the impact like person to person in our community. And then also just like the enthusiasm we received and the attention that we're getting and the encouragement that we're getting is super appreciated and very affirmative as well.
You got friends is so funny.
I think there are like 3 optimistic stories of examples of Web3 outside of Bitcoin having like a really good impact a really interesting impact and powerful impact on the world. I think the first is Gitcoin with their pioneering model of quadratic funding. It's like it's really at the frontier of allocating resources to things that traditionally don't capture value in like market dynamics, and that's really cool. And it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of plays out. I think a second really optimistic story is Goldfinch, and they kind of are able to access liquidity on DeFi to be able to fund USDC-based loans to like businesses in Africa. I think that's an interesting example of using DeFi and actually like not just helping like rich people access liquidity on their ETH. And I think the final optimistic story that's a bit more aligned with DAOs is like MetaFactory, which is this like decentralized fashion house that's experimenting with new ways of sharing ownership with everyone across the supply chain that's involved in building their products. So when they work with artists or manufacturers or anybody that helps create the clothes that they launch, they always give them a bit of equity within their company. It's nominal, but it's new, and it's like sharing ownership across a much wider swath of people. So I think all these 3 things and like the verticals that the layers at which they kind of are innovating at really represent the future of the space.
I am energized by talking to all of you and doing all of the amazing things that you're doing. I'm so honored to I guess know you guys now. We have some time maybe for audience Q&A. If anyone in the audience wants to ask our lovely panelists any questions. Can we get the mic over there?
Cool, thanks. Yeah, so for the folks up there who are in the process of converting their existing organizations to a DAO, I would be really interested to understand what about your current structure organization doesn't feel like it works for you that DAOs solve as a problem.
Go ahead. So, well, without the sort of tokenization of the org, you don't have that sort of sense of collaborative ownership. There's certainly, yes, like you can share the work of the DAO, but with tokens, it's actually something that is tied to a cryptocurrency. It's something that actually contributes to the value of the org overall, and it's something that as the value increases, you can have a liquidity pool that other people buy into, so that you're kind of increasing the shared ownership, but also increasing the value of your token and of your organization overall. So right now, as our org exists, it's just a bunch of really motivated women and non-binary folks working together. But there, once we move to this DAO structure, there will actually be an economic incentive, a shared ownership, and a sort of monetary component to this that doesn't exist yet. And also, sorry, I shouldn't just say that it's not just the tokenization side as well. We're also looking at ways to evolve our org to be gated by NFTs, which again is just another way of attributing ownership and sharing ownership in the broader organization, and one that's tied to an asset that can then be leveraged or sold or traded in the future.
I think for me the question is not so much what's not working right now that would work with the DAO, but rather what's working right now that we can enhance with a DAO structure, right? So one of the first things that comes to mind to me and that I'm most excited about that our DAO structure will enable is right now we have a proposal form open, right? For anyone in the community who has an idea for an initiative, a suggestion for how things can be improved, really anything to contribute. And as a core team, we've been going through these and voting on them, following up with them. It's been amazing to see the level of participation and the ideas that our community has for ways that we can be better, and we've implemented a lot of them. But to be truly community driven, we need the tools to enable a transparent proposal system, right? Where everyone in the community can see all the proposals and vote on them. And on top of that, to enable a structure where the more you're contributing, so the more context you have on the actual inner workings of the DAO and the work being done within the DAO, the greater decision-making power you'll have to enable those votes, enable those ideas. So that's just one example of ways that I think a DAO structure can really mobilize a community. And I think it's just sort of this theme of being community driven. That's super important to Boys Club. And to be truly community driven, we need the infrastructure and tools in place to allow streamlined and organized processes for participation, for contribution, for decision making.
Yeah, and one other thing to add to that, and echoing everything that you just said, Parker, is we are also focused on this sort of like building a DAO to DAO ecosystem, right? So if our community is engaging with another DAO, contributing to another DAO, and that DAO is contributing to us, how do we attribute value to that? And how do we, therefore we need to become a DAO in order to be able to sort of, either offer tokens to our DAO partners or something like that really like solidifies that ecosystem of ownership where we have a stake in them, they have a stake in us, and our success is their success, and it creates this really sort of supportive an actual like tangible sense of like all boats rise with the tide, which is also really important to our overall mission.
I think someone back there had a question. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk today. As you think about impact, how are you collaborating or thinking about partnering with traditional organizations like community-based organizations, nonprofits, governments? And as you partner with them, how are you navigating those challenges, such as onboarding them into Web3 and the crypto conversation?
We got really lucky at Civics Unplugged because we started as a 501c3 nonprofit focused on civics and democracy in America. We then went global, but we had partners like the Smithsonian and National Geographic and huge backers like Craig Newmark, who are not really Web3 people. And so when we launched the Dream DAO, not only did we have an existing community, like you said, Parker, to not we didn't launch the DAO because we needed a community. We launched the DAO because we wanted to level up our community processes. It's really hard to incentivize people to do new things, but it's really easy to incentivize them to do more of what they're doing. And so we launched with a community, and we launched with all of these funders and backers. We also didn't tell our board before we launched the Dream DAO at the nonprofit, and then we walked into the board meeting. And we walked in the board meeting, we're like, hey guys, let's do a DAO run through. And they were like, oh, this is so cool. When are you guys thinking? Q4? And we're like, oh no, we did it in November. Okay, great. And so what we kind of had to do was say we built institutional trust with a lot of these huge organizations and brands for 2 years, and then we said, hey, don't come with us, just like watch us, and like we'll slowly onboard you into the space. And now, a couple months later, it happened a little faster than we expected, but like we have like the largest criminal justice organization on the planet coming to us and saying, hey, we know this technology is good, we've seen you do it, and we trust you, can you help us do it ourselves? And like that model needs to be replicated in that there needs to be a lot of people that have already built organizational trust outside of Web3 that are the shepherds. We need like you said, these Web3 memes, we need like a Web3 Snooki to like be the trusted, like making it cool, making it culture, to like have a lot of these people want to dip their toes in. And it's really hard with governments and nonprofits. Like companies want to monetize and extract all the time. And so obviously they want to launch NFTs. But when you have this like nonprofit that's never done anything, that their website looks like it was built in 1990, like before it was born. It's like, oh, what is an NFT? They're like, I don't want to touch this like scammy thing. And so it's like you kind of have to be the trustworthy person, and like DreamedOut is starting to be that, and organizations like Boys Club are going to start to be that. It's not going to be like these huge layer ones that are going to shepherd nonprofits and governments into the space. It's going to be like trustworthy people that have already done cool shit that are continuing to do cool shit.
Okay. Yeah, the way by which we work with nonprofits or Web2 companies or anything of that nature is just by using Web3 to build really compelling products and product experiences for them. I think that's like really the base of this technology, like how we can use it to like build things that people need. And it's really hard to kind of like get around that.
Something that we're trying to do at Mori Music is rather than going to the organization at large, we're going to individual people within those organizations, basically that are already pilled on the space and or are not yet, but like are curious enough to join us, and then they are kind of our foot soldiers that then go to their organizations and say, hey, this is the way that you can get involved, this is the way that you can create value for both like the people that you're catering to, but also yourselves.
I think they had a question first. Just be fair.
I always have a question.
Hello everyone, I'm SX Noir. Shout out to Alexa, I love her for her house. I wanted to bring up something that, so I work in the industry of sex technology, so I'm really adamant on bringing people in NFT, crypto, blockchain technology into the sex industry. So one of the things that you mentioned earlier, I think, from the DreamedOut is mentioning incarcerated people and also sexual assault victims. So my fear is like the language, like it makes me cringe. Like the language that people use around incarcerated people and sexually assaulted people, is that your lived experience? And like if it's not, like is there someone in the conversation whose lived experience it is? So my mother was incarcerated for most of my life, and I'm telling you right now, recognition is not the reparation she wants. She worked for 25 cents an hour for over 10 years. So it's not, she has Cash App and she's like invested in blockchain. Like I set up her MetaMask, I gave her some Ethereum. That's not reparations. And so when people start using the language that is virtual signaling toward these very oppressed groups, it makes me very concerned, because it makes me feel like it's not talking to me. Because if you're talking to me, you're not going to use that language. We're not going to use the language of they just want more than money. No, we want money. So my question is, how do you all communicate to communities that are beyond just your lived experience? Because the most marginalized, like when you mention like, now I'm aware of the other 100 million people, like I am always aware of those people. That's who I am. And so my concern is like everyone in the Web3 is like, oh, everything's so great. Oh, kumbaya. Oh, we're gonna help the people, the marginalized. How are you gonna do that? And how do you incorporate language into that? And also how do you have representation on your team to represent the most marginalized people and actually give them money? Thank you.
That's a really good point. Yeah. So you're 100% right. Everybody in Web3 is like totally pigeonholed. Like I said, like they think that just donating to organizations is fixing the problem, which it's not. DreamedOut isn't doing it ourselves, right? We're working with Reform, it was founded by Meek Mill after he was wrongfully incarcerated, and then Jay-Z and a bunch of other people helped him get out, and he said, well, hey, I want to give back to the people like me who don't have this network. So it's the largest network of criminal justice reformers, both grassroots criminal justice reformers and federal criminal justice reformers. It's one of the most well-funded organizations, and they're great. I actually would encourage you to come in, because you are one of the only people at the intersection of lived experience and the ways that they can use crypto to help. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do is we're not saying we're building, I agree with you, everybody in Web3 is like, oh my God, I'm gonna build this for like this marginalized group, and my name's like Thanasi, and I'm white, and I'm gonna build this for this marginalized group. Like, I'm so cool. Like, no, that's not what we're doing, and I appreciate you calling people out like that, because that's bullshit. What we really need to do is like, I've gone through the ringer and like built a social impact DAO with Gary and with Chabu and with Madison and all these people. And like, we have a lot of knowledge and we failed a ton that we can then share with Reform. Reform has a ton of money. They don't need money. But what they do need is to give their grassroots organizations the ability to build stronger communities, to incentivize folks to do things, to have ownership over property and land as they get out of prison. And so like, I totally agree with what you said, but it's not our job to figure out how to do it. It's our job to say, what are your objectives? This is what we've learned from like building a social impact DAO. You can probably incorporate it into what you're doing. And maybe we can help you, maybe we can't, but it's about collaboration, both intergenerationally, interlived experience. Like we have to all collaborate. And so yeah, to TLDR, totally understand where you're coming from, and like you're 100% right. And that's why with Reform and all the other work we're doing, we are literally just sharing what we've learned and where we failed, so that they don't have to. Someone offered Reform $1.25 million to launch an NFT. That was their price to build a mint button and a website. $1.25 million. That's not only predatory, that's like fucking horrible. And like the only people that were able to tell him, hey, that's not the price that people charge, was like people that know in the space. And if we're keeping all that knowledge to ourselves, we're harming people. We're actively harming people by not saying that's predatory. So yeah, I also encourage everybody here to check out Reform and donate, because the criminal justice work they're doing, state to state, is really, really important. And incarceration is one of the most systemically damaging issues to every part of society, from your blockchain portfolio to the neighborhoods you live in. So you should probably help with that.
Hi, I recognize you from Evan McMullen's event at the Williamsburg Hotel. You always have great questions, so I love what you're doing. Also, I always love your outfits. I think you bring up a really great point. I think something that I've been thinking about a lot is like, I feel so cringe and just like turned off when people say Web3 is going to fix everything, right? And I think that is not the approach to take. I think there are a lot of systemic issues in our society that aren't just going, Web3 is not going to be a band-aid to them. Having protocols being on-chain is not going to be a band-aid on them. And there's actually been a lot of really interesting academic studies done on community mobilization, specifically comparing resistance movements to DAO structures that actually show that when you try to put every decision or every process to make decisions about community mobilization on chain, it actually results in the disintegration over time of those communities. So something I've been thinking about a lot is I absolutely recognize the importance of these conversations and want to have them more and more with people in the crypto space. I think there needs to be an appreciation of having a lot of these discussions off chain, and also like recognizing that just putting things on chain and just sort of porting these I guess social justice ideals into Web3 isn't going to accelerate or solve anything necessarily. So I think really emphasizing that and thinking about how we can actually have more in real life discussions and conversations and education around these issues before we think about how to integrate that into blockchain is super important.
Keep calling people out though, for sure. Like, it needs to be something that's repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated.
Yeah, I think we're coming to the end of it, but we will stick around for 45 minutes, so you can always ask your questions. So let's give a warm welcome and a round of applause for our wonderful speakers here.
Thank you guys all so much. Thank you everyone for coming out to Honor Friday once again. It was really special. And thank you for asking that very important question.